What's up, soul warriors? Welcome to this episode of the Deeper Truth Healing Hour with me, Reverend LC, and I'm super grateful and honored to be here as always. I missed last week and I just needed some self care time. And I had a huge week of so many different things, emotional, job, I mean just so much that it really brought me to the inspiration to do this show tonight centered around the word self-care and selfish. What's really the difference? We hear the common term self care a lot, but how often do we actually know what that means? Are we left to our own devices to decide what that is? And those of us, especially coming from a place of substance use disorder, that can be a very iffy subject. We kind of have this tendency to feel like self care equals selfishness and that we don't have the right to be selfish because while we were in our very active substance use disorder, we were very much selfish or self-centered. And so there's a lot of confusion around this subject. And so I just wanted to come and lend my own learned experience, and just my own passion and feelings about it. So before we get into this tonight, I want to say a couple things. I want you to look at the great new merch, this new line that's come from Sober is the New Cool and Kim Bellis. I love this shirt. This is an amazing shirt. I love Kim Bellis. I love Sober is the New Cool. And I urge you to go and get your own recovery swag at soberisthenewcool.ca. Make sure that you tell them that LC and Recovery Soul Food sent you. I'm just so honored to get to share in this passion project with Kim Bellis and Sober is the New Cool and that family and my equality family. We're all human beings. And we all deserve a place in this world. I mean, we're here by divine right, correct? And so I appreciate this new merchandise. My wife got the Other Love Wins shirt, and I can't wait to take some pictures and upload those. So make sure that you go visit Kim Bellis and check out some of their amazing sober swag at soberisthenewcool.ca. And next, I want to still ask you, have you read Pamela Topjian's book, I Didn't Come This Far to Only Come This Far Yet? If the answer is no, you're missing an amazing, powerful comeback, get up from your give up and create a life you love story. And you can pick this book up. It's so affordable. That's what I love about Pamela. Pamela wrote this book just to lend of her own experience and wisdom and how she's managed to, like I said, get up from her give up and create a life she loves. And she's made it affordable for all of us because we all deserve divine, inspiration. We all deserve to have that, to be able to do that. And so you can afford this book. It's very affordable. Go to Amazon.com, type in I didn't come this far to only come this far, or type in Pamela M. Topjian and check out all the other amazing original art and beautiful things that she's creating there. I support my sister in all that she does. You guys are my soul family. These are my soul sisters I've just told you about. And again, I'm grateful to be here. Make sure that you follow Recovery Soul Food here on TikTok at Recovery Soul Food and Instagram at Recovery_Soul Food. And if you like the content that you get here, consider becoming a monthly supporter by going to www.anchor.fm/Recovery Soul Food and click that support button. It means the world to me that you all do that and that you show up here and support the things that I do. This is an amazing passion project for me. Every single thing that I do is a passion project for me. And it's why I feel not necessarily qualified, but I do have something to say about this subject of self-care versus selfish. So if you all are ready to get into this deeper truth healing hour with me, Reverend LC, then I'm ready too. So let's go. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so grateful again and honored to be here. And I missed y'all last week. What's up, Kim? What's up, Pamela? And I should probably say this for the people that hear this because this becomes an immediate podcast download. So they don't get to see the the video part of this. I'm sure for people that just listen to this on podcast, they think, what is this person doing? Just stop in the middle of a sentence and just call out somebody's name. Well, I just want to remind you that this is recorded live, and so that's why I just cut off somewhere. Oh man. So what an amazing subject for us to talk about. And I mean it's really close to me because I did have this big big family revelation. Those I like to call it a revelation and not an argument because revelation is truly what it is. If I say a big family argument, it puts a spin on it that's not all that positive, but really it was a breakthrough. But it calls me to think about a whole lot of things. And one of the things that it calls me to think about is self-care versus selfish. And it can be taken so many different ways. And like I said, when we're coming from that substance use disorder background, we think that when someone says to us self care, it immediately causes us to kind of clench up and tense up and think we can't do that because, that type of disorder is one that is spent solely self-centered. It is disease-centered, really. It's not necessarily self-centered, it's disease-centered. You can't really think about anything else. You can't really do anything else. I mean, it is all that all the time. And if we're not coming from that standpoint, and maybe we can be coming from both of these standpoints. When we look at it from a religious standpoint, we can often easily confuse self care for selfishness. That we're often taught that self sacrifice is godly. We're taught that selflessness is also, godly. But to what extent? We're not often taught past that, and it can very much become dangerous because selflessness can very quickly turn into martyrism. And martyrism, to me, and what my experience and what I've come to understand, is basically a trauma response. That selflessness. I'm there for everybody. I'm all self-sacrificing. I'm always there for anyone in need, or anything. Gets to a place where you become an empty person trying to fill the cups of others. But what it then begins to create in you is resentment. And I think that we can very quickly distinguish between self-care and selfishness by measuring that resentment. Is this thing that you are doing, or is this emotion that you are lending this to under whatever umbrella, is it causing you to give so much of yourself that you are no longer healthy? Or do we look at the other aspect of someone who is calling their selfishness or self-centeredness self-care? And the way we distinguish that is, what is the intent behind what it is that you are calling self-care? Are you doing for yourself regardless of how it's affecting others? Are you doing for yourself even if you can see that it is greatly affecting others in a negative light? It's this wanting what you want regardless of others. And what I've learned and come to understand is that self-care is actually filling your energetic and health cup so that you can truly be of service to others. There's a big difference in that. And I know in the terms of a lot of therapy and therapist sessions that they talk a lot about self-care. But as I see people in my own world, That's kind of where it stops. And they do not explain this umbrella to a greater extent. And I see people that I love calling these trauma responses, these actions that they're in, where they are completely honed in on what it is that they feel like they need to do for them, regardless of how it's affecting their lives in a greater way. They're not able to back up and look at the big picture. They're just putting everything that they want, everything that they want to do, regardless of how it's affecting anybody else, and they're throwing it under the umbrella of self-care. And it's and they follow it up with, well, my therapist said I have to do this. But that's unfair. It's unfair that we're not talked to about that more, especially in a therapy setting. And, if we have any therapists or counselors that may be listening to this tonight, please take this in, because I think that it would be of greater service to people in their lives as a whole, especially when we're looking at traumatized people that feel broken and are in this space of therapy for help. I think that gives us a greater responsibility to open up what help is, and to greater define some of the very common terms that we are hearing right now in the world, especially in, say, the spiritual community and the recovery community, where we're hearing a lot about self-care, and we're hearing a lot about a purpose-driven life, and we're hearing a lot about spiritual awakening and all of these things. But sometimes they're not expanded upon in a way that make them truly understandable and give us actual health. Having a life purpose, having a purpose for our lives is a very healthy place to be. But I ask you, does it take more from others or leave you in an imbalanced state? Because when we're in an imbalanced state, it can easily slip over into obsessiveness, and it can be causing this very low frequency type resentment that we don't even realize is growing there. I remember when I first felt like I had a purpose for my life, and it's doing, what I'm doing now, and speaking in public. I remember that I could not operate outside of that sphere. And it was because it wasn't a bad thing or a negative thing, though it began to start to turn in that direction, because I had no idea of there being some type of balance that I needed to go along with that. It was like I dedicated my entire life to that, and I was being greatly fulfilled, and I was doing a lot of great things in the community, and I was, you know, I had the opportunity for once in my life to be a positive impact on the community, and humanity, and people around me, versus always being that vampire of energy, and all of those things that I'd always experienced. And so, of course, having that feeling for the first time, I became full on obsessed with it and began running in that direction. And it was hard for me to see. It wasn't an intentional, I'm not looking at anything around me, I don't care how this affects anybody. It wasn't that way. It was for the first time I feel like I'm doing something positive, and I can't help myself but to run after this. And I started having this. Oh, I'm so happy, Brett, and love you, Chrissy. Thank you both for being here. I started having these conversations with my family, and my wife was very much one who almost basically said that felt like they weren't important to me anymore. And I couldn't hear that in the beginning. When she was saying that, I couldn't hear that. In fact, what it ignited in me was almost this, what do you mean? I'm doing something positive for once. I'm saying something that means something, that's helping others in their life, and I'm getting to share of this rotten experience of my life, and it's helping others. And all of those things were true. But I didn't realize that I was also making these other people feel like they were no longer important. And so my point for sharing this right here is that this can happen to a lot of us coming from the substance use disorder where, we take away the the drugs, the alcohol, the dangerous habit, and it's a process in which we have to start to become a whole and healthy human being, because we have a lot of tendencies of obsessive thinking and obsessive actions that we've now taken from the negative and we put it to the positive, and it's hard to walk the line. It's hard to distinguish when even positivity can can lean over and cause negative events in our lives, can cause negative emotions, and it can become this distance between ourselves and those that we love. And so I bring all that up because there is value in balance, and there's also value, the most value of all, in awareness. And for being able to be aware when maybe we have slipped over into that space, for being able to be aware that we can only begin to start a practice of balance when it comes to self-care or selfish. We can only start to begin a place of balance from a place of being aware that, oh, maybe the scales are tipping one way or the other. Because, balance is a very delicate subject. It's enough of this and enough of this that it kind of balances out our lives. And tipped either way, to the positive or the negative, creates an off balance life. And an imbalanced life can begin to cause these subtle little emotions that we don't actually see until they become infections within our souls, within our families, within our lives. It's kind of the way that our substance use started. It started out as something people are going to people are probably going to click off when they hear me say this, but it started out as something positive. It started out as a coping mechanism to whatever pain you were in, or it started out as a positive way to connect with your friends. It started out in a way that was serving us. By the time it was over, the scales had tipped and it was no longer serving us whatsoever. But now we were stuck in that loop. And it didn't necessarily happen overnight. It happened little by little by little by little. So for those of you that I'm talking to, and that's going to be most of you that are watching in this space, most of you that are watching in this space are not coming from a place of, I want what I want and I don't care how it affects others. That's not the space you're coming from. That's very seldom the place most of us are coming from. You're you're just coming from a place of, what is the fine line between self-care and selfish? What is that fine line, and how can I create it to be a more a, a a brighter space for me to be able to see? And that's going to come, one, with when you have healthy, whole people around you, that you're not afraid for them to hold you accountable and to help you out. And when you can have open discussions about this, because sometimes the people that also are coming at you and saying, hey, your self-care is affecting me in a terrible way, they also have to take a moment to look at themselves as well. I mean, it creates this beautiful moment of connection between people that love each other, because they then too can come to a space and say, okay, how much do maybe I need self care? Is there a place of envy within me that you're getting to self-care and I don't feel like I am? And it's okay to feel like everything we're talking about, it's okay to feel these ways. This is humanness. This is what we get. And we can't wrong or shame ourselves for having emotions. The thing is we got to be able to recognize them and talk about them. So when we can have these brilliant conversations with people around us that are also in a way in on a journey of health and wholeness within, then we can start these conversations, and that's how balance begins. Awareness and communication. And for those of us that are operating under a life purpose, and let's say that may be getting in our way, let us also think of the analogy of the whole airplane thing. And I know it's overused, but it's a great analogy. Yes, we have to put our face mask on in order to be able to save our loved ones. And when we first think about that, like, what do you mean I don't put the oxygen mask on my child first? That doesn't even make sense. But the greatest part about recovery, regardless of what space that is or what that word means for you, the greatest thing about recovery is that we can back up and see the bigger picture. And so, if we're not alive and we just save the child, what then happens to the child? So, yes, we have to fill our own cup before we can actually fill the cup of others. And how do we do that in a balance that is healthy for all involved? Because when you're getting a lot of flack from outside, again, before you start to consider it, please make sure you look at the intentions of those that are coming against your self-care. Okay? And also make sure that you have acknowledged your true intentions for that as well. Are we using it to escape? Because I know a lot of my purpose in the beginning was a wonderful escape from a lot of the emotional issues and unhealed issues that were happening in my family. It was so much easier for me to concentrate on something that I felt like was very, very positive versus having to look at all the ways that I felt like I was failing my family, or that we were having problems in our family. My son in the midst of his trauma responses as a teenager, my wife in the midst of her Great Depression, me trying to figure out how to be a sober, healing human being for the first time ever, really, in my life, and trying to figure out what all of this meant. This whole recovery process is not black and white, nor is it cut and dry, and nor does it just happen because we gain years of sobriety. I'll repeat that. Recovery doesn't happen because we just gain years and time of abstinence. Recovery happens when we are willing to look at all of these intricate places within where we are still imbalanced. And yes, self-sacrifice is part of living a greater purposed life, but not when it moves into, to what extent? Not when it moves into feeling like you've only given enough when you are negative in what you have to give. And when you are giving, is it coming from a place of intention to serve, or is it coming from a place of being served, so to speak? Is it serving you to feel like everybody acknowledges how selfless you are? Is it coming from a place of a need to feel seen or needed? Because we have to understand trauma lives within us on a subconscious level. And maybe you've let the trauma go in your mind, or maybe you've given it up, or maybe you've forgiven and you've done all of that. But let us remember that the body keeps the score, and the subconscious is the place within us that operates our lives at 90%. And I still think that that math is a bit off. I'd say we're more 95 subconscious and about 5% conscious in everyday life. And so we have to start to be able to observe our giving from a more healed and healthy place. And we cannot be afraid to see where we still have work to do. You know, the moment we think that we've done enough work that we shouldn't be going through something anymore, that's a moment we need to probably revisit that very subject because it is a very ongoing process. And because we are human, there is not a destination that we get to where we say, I'm healed, it is done. Not that we shouldn't strive for that, but what we're basically striving for is an existence that is healthy and happy and whole, regardless of what is going on in the world, in the economy, on the news. How do we reach a place of whole and happiness within ourselves? Because that becomes true mastery. True self mastery comes in the fact when you can become the peace in the storm. That the storm doesn't matter, but it could be, but that you are a whole and healthy human being in the midst of it. I don't know, Pamela, we're in kind of a midst of a storm, so if I'm cutting in and out, I apologize all. I uh I wish I had Brett here to show me how to do that local recording so when I upload it, there'll be no interruptions, but for another time. For another time. All right. How to find balance. Do what's right for you in the ways that are right for you and the others around you as best you can. And in that, it helps you become more balanced. We talked about looking for obsessive thinking and emotional fulfillment. Where else, besides this one area of your life, are you gaining emotional fulfillment? Or have the scales tipped to where you're only getting emotional fulfillment when you are operating in what you've described as self-care mode, or are you able to find fulfillment here, fulfillment with the family, fulfillment in work and other things? And at some point I'd love to do a video about that as well, because that's something else I'm experiencing in my life with some people close to me, and something I went through. I had to find a way to be grateful while I was on my knees cleaning another person's toilet. That is a wonderful, wonderful learning experience on how to create true gratitude and how that happens in your life. So we'll get to at another time how to be happy in amongst the worst of situations. How to find peace and operate in self-care even when you are in the midst of a task that doesn't at all seem like it is self-caring, right? Your self-care comes from within. It doesn't really actually come from without. It doesn't come in what it is that you're doing. It comes from within. What helps you energetically fill your cup? And I think that if you are in a space of relationship space, because this becomes very hard in relationships, very hard in relationships. How do two people in a relationship, especially if we have children, how do two people in a relationship find time and create space and balance for them to gain self-care, each as individuals and together as a unit? That's where our communication's going to come in. That's where some of our little sacrifice is going to come in. Because as much as I need to do this, and, you know, as much as I need to do this, we need to be able to find how I can do some of this and help you do whatever it is that you need to do. And how do we become that? Because as we become a whole and healthy individuals, then our children, that then goes into it, funnels into our children. Because it's less about what our children are absorbing as they're watching or hearing, but that emotional energy that is at the underlayment of everything in our household. That's what they're absorbing. And it's so easy for me to see that when I look at my own son, who's now 23, and he's living his own life, and I'm watching him in this very unhealthy relationship. And what I'm looking at is not what me and his mom said to him, but it was the energy that we created together as two very unhealthy people trying to play life, if you will, trying to learn how to do life as sober, traumatized human beings. And no matter what we said or the actions that we tried to take, that emotional, foundation of energy that we were creating in the space was what he was actually absorbing. And I'm being able to see that now as I look back, and it's very intriguing to me. It has taught me a lot. So, if we're in coupleship or in relationship and we're talking about this very subject, open communication is probably the key, and the intentions behind what it is that we are requesting is also going to be another great key. And for those of us, again, who are coming from a place of or a history of substance use disorder, we got to make sure we're not looking for another escape. Let us not be afraid to examine our true intentions. That's what healing and recovery is. And for those of us, who may work in that mental health and substance use disorder, or, a counseling or therapy space, we often find that balance far tipped to what it is, once again, that we are finding the most emotional fulfillment in, even though it may not look like emotional fulfillment, because when you're working in those areas, you're dealing with a lot of heavy trauma, dealing with a lot of heavy instances and circumstances and conversations, that it's very hard then to turn around and cut that off and then go home and just be, normal and light in a family who has no experience with what we've been dealing with all day. And that's a very, very hard balance to find. But in order to be truly effective on both ends, it's worth doing, it's worth finding. Because what techniques are you using to basically kind of, it's almost like neurolinguistic programming. How are you bringing all of this into this package that you can, in your mind, in your visualization, kind of put to the side and open yourself now to people that you're trying to nurture and love, so that they don't end up having a life like what you've just put in your subconscious box. But there are ways and techniques that we can find that healthy balance, because balance is the key to everything. The balance is the key to our health. Balance is the key to our healthy relationships. Balance is the key to our recovery, because when that balance is not, relapse happens when an imbalance happens, and when it's been happening for far too long. We can only fill from an empty emotional cup for so long before we become cracked in our foundation. And when that happens, we're no longer left with the energy to properly work through the triggers that are coming in our lives. And you cannot tell when or what trigger is going to be the one that finally says, enough's enough. Your emotional body, your spirit is saying, I can't take anymore. I have nothing left to give. Your brain may say you have plenty left to give because you have plenty knowledge still stuck in your head. You can still say the right things, you can still do the right things, but when your soul is screaming, I need, then the balance becomes tipped way too far, and we no longer have the energy to keep ourselves healthy. So, for those of you that are watching this episode from that space of recovery, this is vital to your ability to be able to work through all of this. So, oh, okay. Is it positively affecting my life, or it's just or just this one personal aspect? So that's basically what we've been talking about. This self-care, all of that. Is it positively affecting my life in a greater way, or is it just affecting me in this one aspect? Is it just giving and lending itself to my obsessive thinking and emotional fulfillment? Okay. It is more than okay to be purpose driven, but imbalance will not serve your highest purpose. Nourish your soul that you have so that you have more to give to this purpose, and create boundaries with yourself. And that's basically creating the boundaries is basically the same as creating the intentions around how are you going to now start to have this conversation with yourself about your self-care. If you are in a family unit where you all have to work and you have children, how do you begin to start planning that stuff out? We have to plan out our recovery. I've always talked about having a recovery battle plan. Part of your daily battle plan is, okay, how are we going to, as a unit, going to work out our emotional health? Because that's going to nourish our children. That's the soil that is nourishing the seed of life. And it is your emotional fulfillment that actually becomes the water that nourishes all of that. So, how do we now begin to work out some kind of schedule to where one person doesn't feel like, well, you're getting all of your self care, what's left over for me? And resentment starts creeping in little by little. That's the nature of resentment. It rarely ever comes all at once. It comes in little by little by little. And before you know it, there is this distance that's now grown between you. And because it's been happening little and little over time, you don't really know where to go back and start. Don't know where to go back and start. Be strong, be kind, be balanced, and be boundaried. Isn't that the isn't that the hope for all of us? That we can be all of those things? The best we can do is just get up and try every day and realize that it's okay that there are going to be some days that we just don't make it. I am way imbalanced right now in what I'm giving to my work because of what I see as the greater vision. But I have found it very hard to leave that work at work and come home and create my own sacred space. This my little corner right here of where we live is my little sacred space. And I love to get in this sacred space and give from my heart. But there are weeks like last week where that just wasn't possible. I just didn't have it to give. And I've been through this so much with Recovery Soul Food and the Transgender Mentor and Walk a Mile in My Shoes and all of the ventures that I do. And I get to a place, and this is why I had to take a break in 2021, because I found myself giving from the wrong intentions. Not because they were negative intentions, but I was giving from an empty emotional cup. And it started to become more robotic and less divinely inspired, that it was all of a sudden becoming more burdensome than it was the way it truly began. And I had to fight hard to honor what I was feeling inside. My wife was awake for the first time in 7 years, and she needed me. We needed to be rebuilding, getting to know each other again. We needed that time to really spend with each other. But because so much had occurred in those years, it was so much easier for me to give of myself in this way than it was for me to go and be uncomfortable and open and vulnerable with my wife, who I definitely had some resentment for, and had to really look at that, and had to figure out, where do we go from here? And so, as I knew my soul was calling me to step away from this platform that I had worked so hard to build, and had reached the place where I was like, well, this is where I wanted to be with it. At first, I thought it was like a cruel divine joke. It's like, what do you mean? We get here, and now it's time to step back. It took me a while to wrestle with that for the first few months, to the point where I didn't let it go all at once. I did it little by little, because cutting it off all at once was not going to be the most positive thing for me anyway. But when I had to truly honor that I had nothing left to give my platforms, I had to trust that either it'll be here when I've done this healing process and I'm ready to come back, or I'll create something new, or I'll be led in a different direction. And that's why when I came back for season 4 of the Recovery Soul Food podcast, this past season and this coming up season has already proven to be so much more emotionally fulfilling than it had been in season 3. Not that it wasn't fulfilling, it was. But from the time that I had first started all of this till 2021, when my entire outside life was falling apart, and the only real life preserver I felt like I had was this podcast and this platform, you know, at that time, it was not as fulfilling when I first started. And I had to let myself know that it is okay for me to step back. And I started honoring my gut feelings. It's like today, I wasn't sure if I was going to actually, have the energy tonight to come and share in this space, but I felt like there was something pulling me for this message. And there's a distinct difference in me in a real pull, which I call a divine pull to give something that I've been inspired to do at an earlier date, versus just coming and sharing. And there are times for both. But I wasn't sure I was going to have the energy to come and do this. And then I got the opportunity to witness this amazing conversation between people that I love so much, that I'm just so grateful for their presence in my life. And it became this amazing confirmation that tonight we're operating under soul purpose. Tonight, we're operating from a different intention. This is more than just coming and sharing. This is this is something that's maybe divinely inspired. And if I feel like there's a message within me to give, then I only really feel fulfilled when I give it. And so, we can watch for those confirmations. When we're in a place of, well, I don't know. We can watch for confirmations to show up in our lives to let us know one way or the other. And a lot of times they show up and let you know, yes, let's move forward. And then sometimes nothing shows up and you can say, well, okay, I feel okay about not doing this. But I can say that though our downloads and our likes and our views and all of that stuff drastically decreased in season 4 of Recovery Soul Food Podcast, I have truly been more fulfilled on a soul level by the people that I have made contact with and connections with and sat with and met, that I can't even explain how grateful that I am for the walking away, because the walking away renewed my passion. It was my ego that I wrestled with. It was how all of the likes and all of the views and all of the comments were fulfilling me emotionally that became very egoic. That was the wrestling of the ego, is who am I if all of these people aren't telling me that I'm somebody? And that's a hard lesson to learn, to cut yourself off from that and then have to just learn you're somebody anyway. You're somebody regardless. That's why I constantly say, whether you feel like your purpose is to be the best stay at home mom or dad that you can possibly be, or your purpose is to have the most downloads of a podcast that is truly sowing into people's spirits, it doesn't matter. They are both so much the same. One is not bigger than the other, one is not more important than the other. It is how much of ourselves from a healthy way are we giving to that we feel purposed to do? And how are we showing up for those that we love in the midst of that? And thus is part of our recovery journey. Recovery doesn't stop at getting up from our give up. It continues on to creating a life that we love. Sometimes when I start taking things in my life for granted, when I take my wife for granted, and I getting these emotional lulls where I forget sometimes how important she is to me, or how I take for granted that my life, I have to get back into the space of just soaking in gratitude. And Kelly has asked me a question. Was I an addict? You bet your life. I spent 22 years, which was a whole lot of my life, purely addicted to substance. And I was just a traumatized human being. I I that was my coping mechanism. And I never in a million years would have thought that I could sit in a space of being this healthy. And I'm not even there yet. Like, I'm still every day working on different aspects of my life. Because, like I said, trauma weaves very intricate tentacles down in through our lives that go deeper than we'll ever truly know until we get to the space where it shows up again in our lives. That at in April the 18th will make 10 years that I've been in this recovery process, that I just continue to be amazed at how I can sit in a space and be the person I am today and love the person that I am and live in my skin and live in my soul skin and know that I used to believe that I was God's little joke. And when I say that, I wish for a second there was a way that I could truly make you understand how much I believed that. And of course, my life kept showing me evidence of that because that was where my focus was. And where your belief system is, that is where your focus is, and your life has no other choice but to continue to show you evidence of that because that is a deep seated belief system. So it has taken me a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of healing, a lot of getting uncomfortable, a lot of looking at aspects of myself that I just did not like, getting to the ugly parts of humanity because, like it or not, we are yin and we are yang, we are light and we are dark. And if we only pay attention to our light and never recognize our dark, we'll never truly know balance. It's okay for us to recognize it. I mean, we have to. We can't pretend it's not there. But I don't identify as an addict because that substance and that coping mechanism saved my life. There were times I didn't want to live, and if it were not for that escape, my other escape would cause me not to be here sitting talking to you right now. And so I had to learn how to look at the light and the dark of that too. Because substance use disorder and that place of where we identify that identity as an addict will keep us locked in only the shame loop of that disease, of that disorder, of that coping mechanism. And when we cannot escape the shame of it and we live in that place of identity, then we can't break the box of it. And I'll let you know right now that you are so much bigger than the identity that you believe you are. And I urge anyone who is in a recovery space to not identify yourself as an addict. Not to realize that you've got an issue with substance use, that it has become this big thing that you can't control by yourself. But be careful what you speak over yourself time and time and time and time again, because what you prophesy over yourself becomes your identity and your belief system, and you can only grow to the environment that you are. I always go back to Jason Rudine's, my brother, my good friend. I always go back to that documentary that he did, and when he was talking about how reptiles only grow to the size of their environment. Well, human beings are like that as well. And we will only grow to the environment of our identity. So, under the umbrella of I am a divine expression of God in human form, that is limitless. And that identity opens me up to every possibility. There's no limit on that. But when I begin to start breaking it down and say I'm this or I'm that or I'm this and I'm that, then I lock myself into a place where I can only grow to that environment. And then be sober. And in the identity of addict, I can be sober, but I can never truly expand outside of what society tells me an addict is. So maybe I won't be using substance, but I'll be gaining that obsessive emotional need from, say, bad and dangerous relationships. Or I'll constantly be broke because what are addicts? They're always broke. So I'll never manage my money right. I'll never create wealth or have a wealth consciousness because, I that's not in that sphere. And so I beg of you, to anyone watching this, to open yourself up past that. Yeah, unknown is scary. Identities create comfort in certain ways, but they also become solitary confinement and jail cells in many other ways. So step outside of the comfort zone. Start to identify yourself as limitless, no matter what you've been through, no matter what your life looks like right now. I don't care if you happen to be sitting in a jail cell right now. You are limitless. The only limits you have are the limits you place upon yourself. by the identities you identify with. So I love y'all. I really do. And I love being able to spend this time with you, and I love being able to share like this from my heart and my soul. And I pray that it has resonated and ministered to your soul in some way. And if it has, drop it in the comments. I always love to know what part of the videos maybe resonated with you. If you have something that's, what's up, Eric? I'll be filming another Walk a Mile in My Shoes with Eric McCoy tomorrow. Look forward to that. But if there is anything that's specific in your world, in your recovery process, or in your awakening process, or all those things that we're so cliched talking about right now, if there's anything that you need, like, reach out, let me know in the comments, or send me a message on Instagram. It's at recovery_soul food. And DMing me there is the closest way or the quickest way to try to get to me. Not as of late, but I'm gonna get better, maybe. We'll see. I'm trying. But message me somewhere and let me know what it is you would like to see a video on. Season 5 of the Recovery Soul Food podcast is going to be kicking off soon, and I'm dedicated this season to bringing you virtual mentors. We, in seasons past, have already talked about, the getting up from our give up. So this season, I want to really focus in on the creating a life you love aspect of that entire trademarked phrase. And so, one of the biggest and greatest assets in my early recovery and personal growth process were virtual mentors. Eventually, we have to get to a place where we have physical mentors, and we'll talk about that as well. But for the time being, I want to make sure that Recovery Soul Food is bringing you some amazing virtual mentors. And so I don't want to tell you who we're kicking it off with, but I know that in season 5 already, we've spent time with Adam and CJ from Mantra Recovery, spending time with Mr. Cecil DC the Brain Supreme Glenn, who is part of the iconic duo hip hop group Tag Team, who had the 90s classic iconic party song, Whoop, there it is. He is going to share with us how to really turn trauma into treasures and how to turn opposition into opportunity with his story and his amazing thirst for knowledge. I know that's going to bless you. So there's a lot coming up in season 5. So y'all be on the lookout for that. Make sure that you take a look at the other shows that I do there on YouTube or on Eric McCoy's highwildclean.org. I think it is, isn't it, Eric? You can catch our Walk a Mile in My Shoes podcast, which we're doing some good stuff this year too. I'm really happy with what we're doing so far. And again, whatever you need, man, reach out. Let me know. We can't help or bring you relevant content if we're not sure what you need. So don't be afraid to reach out. Drop what resonated with you in the comments. Remember, you can get your new Sober is the New Cool swag at soberisthenewcool.ca. I love this equality, love wins whole aspect. I love Kim Bellis. Make sure that you pick up this inspiring book by Miss Pamela Topchin. I didn't come this far to only come this far. They're on Amazon by typing in Pamela Topchin. Also, you can go to hypnobreakthrough.com and you can get a free full session of hypnotherapy just by saying Reverend LC sent you. That's an amazing, amazing asset to your recovery healing process. It is an amazing asset. Sorry, I don't know where my banner went, but it's missing. But just go to www.hypnobreakthrough.com and tell them Reverend LC sent you. Is that all? I think that's all. Make sure you catch us live on Recovery Revolution live page every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. There is so much going on in the world of recovery and healing. And man, I am so super grateful to get to be a part of all of it. So I love you guys. Until next time, bye.